Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a giant, perhaps the giant silhouette on the skyline, the Matterhorn. You sent over a fascinating pile of research on this one.
It really is iconic, isn't it? Often called the Berg de Berge, Mountain of Mountains, and arguably the most photographed mountain anywhere on Earth, that perfect pyramid shape.
Almost too perfect, you might say. But we want to go deeper than just the photos today. We're looking at its whole story.
Exactly. Geographically, it's perched right there on the main alpine watershed, 4,478 meters high. That's about 14,692 feet. And critically, it marks the border between Switzerland, Canton of Valais, and Italy's Aosta Valley.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack how it became this, global icon. We'll dig into the geology, which is frankly mind-bending. Think Africa meets Europe, literally.
And then there's the human story, the climbing history, the intense competition, the rivalry, and of course the tragedy that basically launched modern mountaineering as we know it.
Okay, let's dive in. First up, identity. Even its name isn't straightforward, is it? It seems to change depending on which side of the border you're on.
That's right. It perfectly reflects that cultural divide. The German name, Matterhorn, is quite practical. Matt means meadow. Horn means peak or horn.
Peak of the meadows. Simple enough.
Very direct. But then you cross into Italy or France and it becomes Cervino or Cervin.
And those have Latin roots, something about forests.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
The thinking is it comes from Mons Silvanus or Silvanus, meaning forest mountain. But there's this other popular idea pushed by the geologist Saussure back in the 18th century, linking it to Dir Cervo in Italian, surf in French.
Deer. But there's an even older theory, isn't there? Something about a Roman leader?
Yes, much older. It goes back to Josiah Simler in the 1500s, and it was picked up again later. The idea is the original name was Mons Silvius, named after a Roman commander.
Like Servus Galba, the one Julius Caesar sent to open up the Alpine passes.
Exactly that one, potentially. So the mountain's name might not be about meadows or deer at all, but about, Roman military logistics and trade routes. Kind of puts a different spin on it.
It really does. And this idea of a divided identity sort of mirrors the physical mountain itself, right? The structure, the faces.
Absolutely. It has these four distinct faces facing roughly north, east, south, west, and four main ridges separating them.
But the split isn't even, is it? Switzerland gets more.
That's right. The north, east, and west faces are generally considered Swiss territory. Only the massive south face points fully towards Italy.
So where is the actual borderline drawn?
It runs right along the summit crest. It's this incredibly narrow, exposed, rocky ridge, maybe only about 100 meters long. That tiny strip is the literal dividing line, a real knife edge.
Wow. And we know the height precisely now thanks to modern tech, but the early measurements were a bit all over the place.
Oh, definitely. De Saussure measured it at 4,501.7 meters. Then an Italian engineer, Giordano, got 4,505 meters. Pretty typical inconsistencies for the time.
But then came GPS.
Exactly. In 1999, as part of this big project called Tower to precisely map the Alps, they used GPS. The result was 4,477.54 meters. We usually just round that up to 4,478 meters now.
Which, interestingly, doesn't put it right at the top of the Alpine height chart. It's, sixth highest?
Sixth highest in the Alps, yeah, if you exclude the Caucasus Range. But that needs a bit of context. It's sixth highest among peaks with significant prominence.
Prominence meaning how much it stands out on its own.
Pretty much. How distinct it is from surrounding peaks rather than just being a bump on a larger masses. And the Matterhorn, well, it really stands alone visually. It's got huge prominence.
Okay, so it stands alone. And the reason for that iconic shape, this is where the story gets really wild, the whole African mountain thing. How does that work?
It's quite a story, geologically speaking. It's about plate tectonics on a massive scale. The rock that makes up most of the Matterhorn peak is gneiss.
Metamorphic rock, right? Formed under pressure.
Exactly. And these gneisses belong to what geologists call the dent blanche nappe. Now, a nappe is basically a huge sheet or slab of rock that's been thrust over other rock layers during mountain formation.
Like a giant geological bulldozer pushing a pile of rock.
Sort of, yeah, but over millions of years and driven by continents colliding. Before the Alps were formed, that's the Alpine orogeny, the rocks of the dent blanche nappe, the ones now forming the Matterhorn summit, they were actually part of the African continental plate.
Get out. Really?
Really. When the African plate smashed into the European plate, these harder, older African rocks were pushed northwards and upwards, riding over the top of the softer European rocks beneath them, the panitic naps.
So the peak we see today is literally a chunk of Africa stranded on top of Europe. That's
Like,
incredible.
it's pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And that's just part one of the story.
Yeah.
Because that chunk of Africa wasn't always a sharp pyramid.
Right. You said it was probably more like a rounded hill originally.
Most likely, yes. About 1 million years ago, it was probably much less dramatic. The classic pyramid shape we see now is purely the result of erosion, specifically cirque erosion.
Cirques are those bowl-shaped hollows carved by glaciers.
Exactly. Imagine glaciers forming near the summit and flowing down in different directions, maybe 4 main glaciers diverging from the peak. As they moved, they ground away the rock, carving out these amphitheater-like cirques on all sides.
And the freezing and thawing of water in cracks helps break the rock apart.
Precisely. That freeze-thaw action, ice wedging, is incredibly powerful. It fractures the rock, the glaciers carry the debris away, and over immense time, this process eats away at the mountain from multiple sides, leaving behind the resistant central core.
Which becomes the sharp horn shape.
Oh.
Wow.
And what's fascinating is that de Saussure, the same guy arguing about the name, he kind of figured this out way back in the late 1700s. He looked at it and basically said, some immense force must have shattered and swept away huge amounts of rock to leave this pyramid standing. He was anticipating modern geology.
So the mountain's perfection was literally achieved through destruction.
That's the paradox, yes.
Yeah.
Shaped by glaciers grinding it down. And, well, that leads us nicely into the other defining force.
Yeah.
Human ambition and human destruction, too, in a way.
The race to the summit. Because for a long time, while other big alpine peaks were being climbed, the Matterhorn just seemed untouchable, right?
Absolutely. It inspired real fear. People thought it was unclimbable, maybe even haunted. It was seen as this ultimate, terrifying challenge. And that naturally set the stage for a major international competition.
Centered around two main figures.
Primarily, yes. On one side, you had Jean-Antoine Carrel. He was an Italian guide from the village of Breuil, right at the foot of the Italian side. He knew the mountain like the back of his hand.
And on the other?
Edward Whymper, an English artist, engraver, and a very, very driven mountaineer. He became obsessed with the Matterhorn.
And Carl had the home advantage, trying from the Italian side first.
Yes. Carrel led several early, incredibly arduous attempts up the Italian ridge, the Lion Ridge. He actually managed to reach a high point known as the Shoulder, or Pic Tyndall, back in 1862. That was a huge achievement.
But Whymper kept trying that route too, didn't he? Without much luck.
He did. He made multiple attempts with Carrel, and then on his own, finding the Italian ridge incredibly difficult and dangerous. He was getting more and more frustrated. And then came 1865.
The pivotal year. What happened?
Well, Whymper got word quite suddenly, it seems, that Carrel had been officially hired. The new Italian Alpine Club had basically commissioned Carrel for an all-Italian attempt, funded and supported, to claim the summit for Italy. It was a national pride thing.
Ah. So Whymper felt like he was being shut out. His main rival was now off limits and working for the competition.
Exactly. He saw his chances on the Italian side evaporating. So he did something quite radical. He basically abandoned Breuil, crossed the Theodule Pass over to Zermatt on the Swiss side.
A bold move. And presumably, he had a new plan.
He did. He quickly pulled together a rather large combined party. It included himself, the very famous French guide Michel Cros, an English clergyman, Charles Hudson, the young Lord Francis Douglas, and another inexperienced climber, Douglas Haddo. Crucially, he also hired a Swiss father and son guide team, Peter Togwalder Sr. and Jr., 7 people in total.
A big team. And they targeted the Swiss ridge, the Hernley Ridge.
Yes, the Hernley Ridge, which people had mostly ignored or dismissed as impossible from below. But Whymper decided to try it. And on July 14th, 1865, they went for it.
And?
Amazingly, they found it much, much easier than expected. Whymper famously wrote later that sections that looked vertical and sheer from Zermatt turned out to be almost like staircases. He said parts were so easy we could run about.
Wow. So a surprisingly quick ascent then.
Relatively speaking, yes, they made good time. Whymper and Cros were the first 2 to actually step onto the summit.
What a moment that must have been.
Incredible. And made even sweeter, perhaps, because they peered over the edge down the Italian side and saw Carrel's party. Still struggling, about 400 meters below them on the Italian ridge. They'd beaten them.
The race was won. Triumph.
Complete triumph. They spent about an hour on the summit, but the triumph was tragically short-lived. The descent is where everything went wrong.
This is the infamous accident.
Yes. They were roped together, moving down. The least experienced climber, Haddo, apparently slipped. He fell onto Michel Cros, who was just below him.
Oh, no.
The momentum was too much. Cross was knocked off his feet, and the falling weight pulled Charles Hudson and then Lord Francis Douglas down with him. They all tumbled together down the incredibly steep north face.
But Whymper and the Taugwalders survived how?
The rope, it snapped. The rope connecting Lord Douglas to the elder Peter Taugwalder broke under the sudden immense strain. That break, tragically, saved Taugwalder Sr., Taugwalder Jr., and Whymper from being dragged down as well.
4 men died, just like that.
4,000 feet they fell. It was catastrophic. It sent shockwaves through Europe and, in many ways, marked the end of what's called the golden age of alpinism. The controversy over the broken rope, the inquests. It made the Matterhorn instantly famous worldwide, but for terrible reasons.
And what about Carroll? He saw them on the summit, then they disappeared?
He saw them, yes. He even shouted down. Then the storm came in. He didn't know about the accident immediately, but just 3 days later, on July 17th, Carroll and his party, including Aimé Goret, successfully reached the summit via the Italian Lion Ridge.
Wow, 3 days later. So they proved their route was possible after all.
They did. They lost the race for the first ascent, but they achieved the first ascent of the Italian Ridge, which was a formidable achievement in itself.
So this dramatic, tragic history, how does it shape the Matterhorn experience today? It's obviously still a major climbing destination.
Huge. But that legacy of danger is still very real. Sadly, the Matterhorn remains one of the deadliest mountains in the world.
Really? Still, even with modern gear and guides?
Yes. The estimates are grim, over 500 climber fatalities since 1865. Rockfall is a constant hazard. The weather can change brutally fast, and frankly, sometimes people underestimate it or lack the necessary experience. Overcrowding on popular routes can also be a factor.
That's a sobering number, and sometimes the mountain only gives back its victims decades later, right? With the glaciers melting.
That's true, and it's incredibly poignant. There have been cases, like a French skier who went missing in 1954, his remains only found and identified in 2018, or 2 Japanese climbers lost in 1970, their remains found in 2015. The mountain holds on to its past.
Yet despite all that, people flock to it. What's the main climbing route now? Still the Hernley.
Yes, the Hernley Ridge, the route Whymper took, is by far the most popular. It's graded AD, which means assez difficile, fairly difficult. It's not a walk-up. It requires serious mountaineering skills.
And it gets crowded. It's extremely crowded in peak season, yeah. You can have up to 150 people attempting the summit on a single day in summer. That puts a lot of pressure on the route and on the Hernley Hut, the main mountain refuge at 3,260 meters, which has limited beds and strict rules.
But for the elite climbers, the real challenges are elsewhere, like the North Face.
Oh, absolutely. The North Face is legendary. It wasn't climbed until 1931, much later than the other faces. It's considered one of the trilogy of great, terrifying North Faces in the Alps, along with the Eiger and the Grand de Charasses.
And people race up these routes now. I heard about steed records.
They do. It's a different kind of alpinism. Kilian Jornet, the Catalan ultrarunner and mountaineer, set an astonishing record in 2013. He ran from Bros Cervinia up the Italian Ridge to the summit and back down in, wait for it, 2 hours and 52 minutes.
2 hours, 52 minutes, round trip. That's barely conceivable.
It's superhuman, basically. But it shows that the mountain continues to inspire different kinds of ambition.
And beyond climbing, its cultural footprint is just massive, isn't it?
Immense. Whymper's own book about the ascent, Scrambles Amongst the Alps, became a bestseller and really kick-started mountain tourism and culture. But the Matterhorn itself has become, well, a brand.
The Toblerone chocolate bar.
The classic example, yes. It's been on the Toblerone packaging since 1960. You see its shape hidden in the logo.
And Disneyland, they have the Matterhorn bobsleds ride.
Exactly. A full-scale, albeit smaller, replica. It's inspired paintings, countless films like Disney's Third Man on the Mountain, which is loosely based on the Whymper story, even album covers. Depeche Mode used it. It's everywhere.
Which, of course, fuels massive tourism infrastructure around it. Railways, cable cars.
Definitely. Zermatt is car-free, but heavily served by things like the Gornergrat Railway, offering panoramic views. And the Klein Matterhorn cable car system takes people up to over 3,800 meters.
And didn't they just complete a big new connection between the Swiss and Italian sides?
They did, just last year in 2023. It's called the Matterhorn Alpine Crossing. It's a series of cable cars that now link Zermatt and Brule Cervinia directly over the Fiodol Pass, year-round. You can basically ski or sightsee between Switzerland and Italy, high up in the mountains.
So it brings us back to that core contradiction, doesn't it? This wild, dangerous piece of Africa, shaped by ice, Site of tragedy, source of national rivalries.
And now it's also this global brand, a tourism engine, increasingly accessible, linked up by high-tech cable cars. It embodies so many paradoxes.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe ponder. Back in 1950, there was a serious proposal to build a cable car right to the very summit of the Matterhorn.
Hard to imagine now, maybe.
It was ultimately rejected, and partly because of a huge public outcry. A petition with something like 90,000 signatures arguing the mountain was a unique natural wonder that needed protecting, not conquering with infrastructure. It is still officially listed on Switzerland's Federal Inventory of Natural Monuments.
Yet it's also clearly a massive economic driver for the region.
Exactly. So the question is, with things like the new Alpine crossing making access easier than ever, how do we balance that desire for accessibility, for tourism, for experiencing these places, with the need to conserve a mountain whose legendary status comes precisely from its wildness, its danger, its relative remoteness? Where is the line between appreciation and exploitation when it comes to icons like the Matterhorn? Something to think about.